This is the Sesto Senso 3, a robotic focus motor made by the Italian company PrimaLuceLab. What makes it interesting is that even though it is fully motorized, you can still grab the focus knob by hand and move it, and it remembers exactly where you left it. That is because inside there's a physical encoder that keeps track of the position at all times, so even if you adjust the focus manually, the system still knows where it's at. That means if you're switching between visual observing and imaging, you can go back and forth without removing anything or recalibrating focus.
Wow, that's so beautiful here. I just realized that while Luca and myself are both YouTubing out of Switzerland, it looks like Luca has the first class Switzerland. So it's beautiful weather, the Alps, while I YouTube out of my basement in front of a green screen, and outside it's actually raining. So is there anything that could cheer me up? Well, perhaps that. I also have a Sesto Senso 3, and actually a different one than Luca. And that's also the reason why we're collaborating in this video, because we show you different Sesto Senso 3s. Together with the telescope we installed them on. So, but all these Sesto Senso 3, the regular one that I have for refractors, the SC, which is for Schmidt-Cassegrains, which Luca will present to you, and the LS, which will be released a little bit later and is for DSLRs. All these threes have the things that Luca already mentioned in common. So they have a built-in encoder. But let's start from the beginning, because some of you might have never actually seen or used the Sesto Senso. So that's the electronic autofocuser from PrimaLuceLab. So something similar like the EAF from Sivo. And that here is the former one, the Sesto Senso 2. So let's start here. Why should you have actually chosen a Sesto Senso if you could also have chosen an EAF? The advantage of the Sesto Senso was and is that it is stronger than the EAF, so it can lift more weight, it's more accurate, and it's quite easy to install, while with the EAF you always need some metal devices to screw it on. The Sesto Senso you can simply practically stick on the focuser, screw it on, and that's it. And when I say it's more precise, you also see that the EAF you actually install on the coarse focuser side, while the Sesto Senso will be installed on the fine focuser side. So each turn of the Sesto Senso moves the focuser in a much smaller way than the EAF on the other side would. So that about the Sesto Senso 2. That, by the way, as everything from PrimaLuceLab, very sturdily built. They're also a little bit heavier because of that, but as I always joke, a tank could run over it, nothing would be happening. So you see here the Sesto Senso 3 for the refractor installed already on my SQA 106. And when we now compare it side by side, you see that the plastic cover changed from the top to the back, and it changed from white to black. And I think that should be sufficient that you should absolutely buy it. All kidding beside, as Luca already explained in the introduction, it's the encoder. That's really the new thing about the Sesto Senso 3. And what that really means is that the Sesto Senso, once it's calibrated, always knows exactly where it is. So as you can with the Sesto Senso move the focuser manually, I can turn it now and the Sesto Senso will actually still know where the focuser is. And that's a big difference to the Sesto Senso 2. Once you turn the knob manually, you had to recalibrate. But an even cooler thing is that this coordinates where the focuser is stored within the Sesto Senso, meaning whatever device you connect to it, it always knows where it is and communicates that to the device. So I can connect now with my Eagle and Nina to the Sesto Senso, do there some autofocusing, Afterwards, I can access it with the virtual pad from my iPhone, and it still will show me exactly the same number. And I go that far that you can actually say to the focuser that it should always stay at the same distance. So if anything happens, if for example somebody bumps into your camera and it changes the focuser, it will automatically readjust again. Or in a star party where somebody wants to make a joke and actually moves the focuser manually, it will immediately correct that again. And when we talk about the ease of actually installing it, PrimaLuceLab went now even a step further. With the Sesto Senso 2, depending on the size of your focuser, you had to buy some adapters. With the Sesto Senso 3, these rings are included. They're inserted here in the front of the Sesto Senso 3. And with that, it's practically compatible to most or almost all focusers available, which means you save additional costs. The Sesto Senso 3 is still connected either over two cables, an energy cable and a USB-C cable to the computer, to the rig, or if you have an Eagle, you can actually leave the USB cable away and you can connect to the Eagle over the Ghost mode and do that remotely. Personally, as I also stated when I reviewed this Ghost mode, as long as we still need the energy, one cable or two cable doesn't really make that big a difference, so it's more like a gimmick. On the other side, to the topic of leaving the energy cable away, I think I got never more negative feedback than when I actually presented the EAF Pro to you, which has a built-in battery. And I think that was also a big lesson learned of PrimaLuceLab, that a built-in battery is not something that you actually wish, that you feel is beneficial. And so I think that instead of copying Sivu and also including a battery, that they now went another way and included an encoder is probably the much bigger benefit to you. With that, I hand over to Luca, who will tell you everything about the Sesto Senso 3 SC.
Then there's the Sesto Senso 3 SC, which is the one I have right here. It is designed specifically for Schmidt-Cassegrain telescopes and others that focus by moving the primary mirror instead of having an external draw tube. I didn't actually plan to review this one at first. PrimaLuceLab had sent it to Sashaf to test on his C925 Edge HD telescope, but it turned out that this model doesn't quite fit that particular telescope.
And just to interrupt here, Luca, for a second, this is my 925 Edge HD, and actually here we have the focuser knob. Here the Sesto Sensor would have to be installed, and here is this huge 3-inch opening, and so the distance here is just not wide enough. The 11-inch Edge HD has also, I think, the 3-inch opening, but it's already bigger, and then it works again. But so the 925 is the first who has the larger opening, and that's why it's not working here. There's no way. And with that, back to Luca.
So Sasha texted me and said, hey, maybe you can try it out on your C8 Edge HD, it should fit that one perfectly. And you definitely don't have to ask me twice to try a new Astro toy, so that's exactly what I did. Now this model is built around a new mounting system called a direct pulley clamp, or DPC for short. That is what connects the motor to the telescope's internal focusing knob, and this part is completely backlash free. You just attach it directly to the focuser shaft, and from that point on you can freely move the mirror in or out with an extremely fine precision. Inside there's a high resolution motor with 2 million steps of movement. That's far more than you'll ever actually use, but it gives the system incredible control, especially for autofocus routines. Like the other models, it includes USB-C and Wi-Fi connectivity, so you can control it from your computer, or you can just leave the laptop aside and connect directly with your phone or tablet using their virtual handpad, a simple web interface that runs in any browser. Of course, it also comes with an ASCOM driver, so it shows up in pretty much any astrophotography software, Nina, Sequence Generator Pro, MaxMDL, whatever you use. And if you happen to use PrimaLuce's own Play software or their Eagle computer, it integrates perfectly with those as well. Installing the focuser on the C8 Edge HD was very easy, since this version is made specifically for telescopes with internal focusers. You don't need any custom brackets or modifications, just remove the rubbery cover from the tube's focuser shaft, wrap the provided adapter ring. It is this hard, slightly foamy material around it, tighten a couple of screws, and then slide the motor housing on top. The whole process took me maybe 5 minutes. Once it's attached and powered on, the first thing to do is calibration, and this is a unique feature on this model right here. This is this feature where the motor automatically runs the focuser all the way in and then all the way out. Measuring the total travel range, it takes about 3 minutes, and after that you're working with absolute focus positions. Of course, only a smart part of that is the usable focusing range. But no, every position is a precise number. You'll only need to do this once because the encoder keeps track of where you are, even if you turn the knob by hand. And that's one of the things that makes it practical. Once everything was installed and calibrated, I started using it for a few... It is 4:10, and that's it for the sun for today. So once everything was installed and calibrated, I started using it for a few imaging sessions with the Edge HD 8. Full transparency, at first I did run into some issues. So my first unit was actually faulty, so I had to get it exchanged. And then once I received this one, which was working fine, I also found a couple of software issues. But I reached out to the company and they were super responsive, and they immediately fix those. And so with the updated driver that they sent me, I have been running it super reliably ever since. Now that it's working properly, it's been very smooth. It did take me some trial and error to find the correct settings for Nina's autofocus routine, but once I did, everything is running as it should. For my specific setup, I have found that an autofocus step size of 150 with 4 initial offset steps worked really well for my use case. 150 sounds like a lot, but the motor moves in tiny steps. So this way the curve is very clean and the focus lands consistently every time. Almost every time the R² value for the fit was about 0.8, and in most cases it was actually above 0.9, so that was very reliable. One thing to keep in mind though when evaluating these numbers is of course that this is just a motor and not an actual focuser itself, so the precision you get ultimately will depend on your telescope's internal focusing mechanism. If your mirror has some play or backlash or flop, that will still be there. The Sesto Senso doesn't magically remove that. This is why lots of people opt for external focusers for their SCTs. While this may be the best way, I have found that I've been able to work just as well using the internal focuser, mounting an external focus motor on it for all of my imaging applications. So how has the experience been? On the positive side, it just works. Once it's set up and calibrated, it remembers its position, connects reliably, and delivers focus every time. The Wi-Fi option could be handy for a lot of people if you just want to do quick visual sessions or planetary imaging without setting up the whole shebang. And the ability to still turn the focus knob by hand without losing sync is the main selling point in my opinion. Now, on the flip side, it is of course not the fault of the motor, but it is something to keep in mind. As previously mentioned, if your SCT presents issues with shifting or mirror flop, or if you would like to use filter offsets instead of autofocusing every time, this will not be the solution for you, and you are better off opting for an external focuser instead. And then there is the power connector. It is a 5.5 by 2.5 millimeter plug instead of the, I think, much more common 5.5 by 2.1 millimeter one. which means that most of your existing cables may not fit. They do include a cigarette lighter style 12-volt power lead, but I really wish they just used the more standard connector that every other accessory already uses. For me, this was actually a non-issue because, as I mentioned, I had one of these focusers already in the past. So I already had an adapter at home, and it was as easy as that to use my existing cable with the different plug. Even if you don't have one of these adapters, they cost a few bucks a piece. It's not an issue, but it is something to keep in mind before you put on the focuser, make your first trip under dark skies, and find out you're not actually able to power it. Otherwise, there are no complaints. The build quality is solid. It integrates well with other PrimaLuce gear as well as third-party products. So the experience has been positive. The Sesto Senso 3 SC costs around $289. Yes, there are cheaper focus motors out there, but also more expensive ones. And this one actually offers something unique with the encoder and the possibility of manual control. Therefore, this could be a great option to consider for those who go back and forth between imaging and visual astronomy. You also do get quite a few control and connection options, which is always nice, though I would most likely just stick to using it via the included USB-C cable. Overall, once the initial setup was done and the technical quirks ironed out, it was an enjoyable experience to image with this focuser, and for its price, it's an easy recommendation if you're using an SCT and want a reliable way to automate focus while still being able to use your tube for visual purposes.
So I think I can only share the conclusion of Luca. Also, after some initial issues that also I had with my Sesto Senso 3, as these were pre-production units and there were still some firmware issues which had to be resolved, but which are resolved now. But since I have an official firmware, it runs perfectly. It's the ideal match for such a heavy scope and also for such a heavy setup like the SK106. And I think for anybody who actually owns an Eagle who runs Nina, it's just a logical choice, given it's easier to install than an EAF, given the encoder really brings a lot of advantages. And is what I would consider some real innovation, given this is something new which we haven't seen across the industry. There's a last point which I want to add, which is valid for the refractor one, but also for the SC one. And that is that there might be a completely new user group for electronic autofocuser with the Sesto Senso 3. And it's actually a group which I always have a hard time understanding why they do their hobby as they do it. And what I'm talking about are purely visual astronomers. Because I think until now, for visual astronomers, it might have been not really a consideration to add an electronic autofocuser to a telescope. But for the very few times I actually did visual astronomy, what I realized that each eyepiece actually has a different focal point. And that's always a little bit an issue if you want to swiftly change from one eyepiece to the other to refocus. Now with the encoder and with the virtual pad where you can actually have on each and every smartphone, no matter what OS it has on it, or on each and every tablet, you can have this layout with presets. You can easily do a preset for each of your eyepiece. And when you change your eyepiece, you simply push a button and it will move right away. And still, if you want to focus manually in between because somebody else brings you an eyepiece or whatever, you can do that, and you can still right afterwards press on the buttons again and it will move there again. And I think that's really cool. And so it might be really a good consideration now also for visual astronomers to think about such an electronic autofocuser, given the Wi-Fi connection, given that it works with any device. It doesn't need anything else. You can really use the Sesto Senso 3 without any onboard computer or any other devices, and I think that's pretty cool too. So also from me, 2 thumbs up. A very big thank you to Luca for helping us out here, given my SCT was actually, unfortunately, or perhaps even fortunately now, the only one which would not work with the SC. And I think that was pretty cool now that for once both sides of the Alps in Switzerland work together, and we have this wonderful video now for you. I hope you liked it too. See you next time, and clear skies.